The sun was setting over the city skyline as James Chen tied his work boots. Another evening shift at the Grand Valencia Hotel was about to begin. He straightened his navy blue maintenance uniform, grabbed his tool belt, and took one last look at the small photo on his dresser, his family standing in front of their old apartment, his father's arm around his 12-year-old shoulders. The piano they'd sold was still visible in the background. One day, he whispered to himself, a ritual he'd kept since he was 18. He wasn't sure what one day meant anymore, but it felt important to keep saying it. James arrived at the employee entrance of the Grand Valencia 10 minutes early, as always. The hotel was a towering glass and marble structure, the kind of place where rooms started at $1,000 a night and went up steeply from there. A place where people like him fixed things but remained invisible. "Chen, thank goodness you're early," said Hector, his supervisor. "We've got that big charity thing tonight in the grand ballroom. I need you on standby for anything that might go wrong." "Rich people always find something to complain about." James nodded. "No problem. I'll start by checking the lighting." The grand ballroom was already being transformed by an army of event staff. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and white-gloved servers arranged champagne flutes in perfect pyramids. At the center of it all stood a magnificent grand piano, its black surface reflecting the chandelier light like a mirror. James found himself staring at it longer than he should have. His fingers twitched at his sides. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A woman's voice startled him. He turned to see Rosa from housekeeping. She smiled knowingly. "I've seen you looking at it before." "Do you play?" James shrugged. "Used to. Long time ago." He never elaborated further. How could he explain the 12 years of lessons, the competitions, the dreams? How his piano teacher had once told his parents he had the potential to play in concert halls. That was before his father got sick, before the medical bills, before they sold the piano. "You should try it sometime when nobody's around," Rosa suggested. James laughed. "And get fired? No thanks. I need this job." He forced himself to turn away from the piano and focus on checking the dimmer switches for the crystal chandeliers. Just another day, just another shift. By 7 o'clock, the ballroom had filled with guests. Men in tailored tuxedos and women draped in jewels that cost more than what James would earn in years. He stood in a service corridor, waiting for any maintenance calls. Watching through a crack in the door, the event coordinator, a slender woman named Diane who always spoke too quickly, was having what looked like a meltdown in the corner of the ballroom. She was gesturing wildly while talking on her phone, her face growing redder by the second. "What's going on?" James asked a passing waiter. "Pianist called in sick. Or hungover, more likely," the waiter replied with a smirk. "Diane's freaking out because the host is some tech big shot who specifically requested live piano music." James peered through the door again. The guests were mingling, seemingly unaware of the crisis unfolding. Then a hush fell over the crowd as a woman stepped onto the small stage near the piano. Even from a distance, her presence commanded attention. Victoria Blackwood. James had seen her picture in magazines. 32 years old and already worth hundreds of millions from some app she'd created. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe style that somehow made her sharp features even more striking. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice carried across the room without a microphone, "I understand we have a small problem tonight. Our pianist has apparently decided there were better things to do than honor his commitment." A nervous titter ran through the crowd. "Well, I've never been one to accept problems without creating solutions." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, "So I'm going to make this interesting." She walked over to the piano and ran her fingers along its edge. "This is a Steinway Model D concert grand piano. Retail value, approximately $170,000. The question is, can anyone here make it sing for its supper?" The crowd chuckled, but Victoria wasn't finished. "I'll make a deal," she announced, turning to face the room. "I notice we have quite a few hotel staff here tonight." Her gaze swept across the servers, the bartenders, the security personnel. "Any employee of this fine establishment who can play this piano, truly play it, not just peck out chopsticks, will receive a $10,000 tip from me personally." Gasps and whispers rippled through the ballroom. One of the waiters nearly dropped his tray. "And," Victoria added, a mischievous gleam in her eye, "I'll go out on a date with them. Dinner at the restaurant of their choice. I treat." The room erupted in laughter and applause. Victoria Blackwood was known for her eccentric public gestures. each one calculated to generate buzz and headlines. James felt his heart beating faster. $10,000. It was enough to help his parents with their mortgage. Enough to buy his little sister the laptop she needed for college. Maybe even enough for a down payment on a small piano for himself. But the date? The thought of sitting across a table from someone like Victoria Blackwood made his palms sweat. People from his world and hers didn't mix. It was a reality show gimmick, nothing more. "Any takers?" Victoria asked, gesturing toward the piano. Silence fell over the room. Then hesitantly, one of the bartenders stepped forward. I took lessons as a kid," he said. Victoria smiled encouragingly and gestured for him to sit at the piano. The man cracked his knuckles nervously, then began a halting, elementary version of Fur-Elise. He made it about 30 seconds before hitting a sour note, then another, then seemed to forget the rest entirely. Red-faced, he returned to the bar amid good-natured applause. "A valiant effort," Victoria said. "Anyone else?" A security guard tried next, managing a simple rendition of Heart and Soul that earned him a few chuckles. Then one of the kitchen staff attempted what might have been a Coldplay song, but it was hard to tell. James watched from his hiding spot, his hands shaking slightly. He hadn't touched a piano in 8 years, but something about the gleaming Steinway called to him like a voice from his past. "Ridiculous," muttered Hector, who had joined James at the service door, as if any of us had time for piano lessons growing up. "Rich people games." James remained silent, memories flooding back. His mother working double shifts to pay for his lessons. His father driving him to competitions in their old car that sometimes broke down along the way. The pride in their eyes when he played. Over the next 20 minutes, a few more hotel employees tried their luck. A housekeeper played a simple hymn. A front desk clerk managed the chorus of a pop song. Each attempt was met with polite applause, but Victoria's expression grew increasingly bored. "Well," she finally said, "it seems I'll be keeping my money and my evening free. Perhaps we should move on to—" Wait. The word left James's mouth before he realized he'd stepped through the service door and into the ballroom. Every head turned toward him. "Chen, what are you doing?" Hector hissed from behind. James ignored him. He walked slowly toward the piano, aware of the stairs following him. His work boots felt heavy on the polished marble floor. His uniform with the hotel logo and maintenance embroidered on the pocket suddenly seemed shabby among all the formal wear. Victoria Blackwood's eyebrows rose slightly as he approached. "And you are?" "James Chen, maintenance department." His voice sounded steadier than he felt. A smile played at the corner of her mouth. "Maintenance? Well, Mr. Chen, I hope you're not planning to tune the piano. It was done just yesterday." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back called out, "Show us what you've got, maintenance man." James sat down at the bench and adjusted its height. The keys gleamed white and black before him, both familiar and foreign. He placed his hands on them, feeling their cool smoothness. For a moment, he wasn't sure he remembered anything at all. Then he closed his eyes. In his mind, he was 12 again, sitting in his family's small living room, his piano teacher nodding encouragingly. "Play from your heart, James. Technique can be learned, but feeling must be genuine." He took a deep breath and began to play the opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Low, resonant, building slowly like a storm gathering on the horizon. A hush fell over the ballroom. Even the servers stood still, champagne trays forgotten in their hands. As the music swelled, James opened his eyes. He caught a glimpse of Victoria Blackwood's face, her composed expression giving way to undisguised surprise. But then he was lost again in the music, his fingers finding their way across the keys as if the 8-year gap had never existed. For the first time since he'd sold his childhood piano, James Chen felt completely, truly alive. The music filled every corner of the grand ballroom. James's fingers danced across the keys with growing confidence, each note bringing back muscle memories he thought were long forgotten. The complex melody of Rachmaninoff flowed through him like electricity, his body swaying slightly as the music built toward its first crescendo. He'd chosen this piece deliberately, not because it was showy, though it certainly was, but because it had been the last piece he was working on before they sold the piano. It had remained unfinished business in his mind for 8 long years. James risked a glance up. The crowd had gathered around the piano in a half circle, their faces showing various stages of disbelief. Diane, the event coordinator, had stopped her panicked phone calls and stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, and Victoria Blackwood, the woman who'd started all this, had moved closer, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed in concentration. For a split second, their eyes met. Victoria's expression wasn't one of amusement anymore. It was something harder to read. Surprise, certainly, but something else too. Curiosity, maybe. Or respect. James returned his focus to the piano. The first movement was challenging enough with its technical demands and emotional swings. His fingers stumbled briefly over a particularly difficult passage, but he recovered quickly. This wasn't about perfection. This was about proving something, not to Victoria Blackwood or the room full of wealthy strangers, but to himself. As he reached the movement's conclusion, he leaned into the final notes, letting them resonate through the silent room. For several heartbeats after he finished, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was as if they collectively needed to process what they'd just witnessed. Then the applause began. Hesitant at first, then building into thunderous clapping and cheers. Someone whistled loudly from the back of the room. James remained seated, his hands resting lightly on his lap, his breathing heavy as if he'd run a marathon. In many ways he had. It had been a journey across years, across lives. From the boy with dreams to the man in a maintenance uniform who had just shocked a room full of people who normally wouldn't give him a second glance. Well, Victoria's voice cut through the applause as she stepped forward. I believe we have our pianist for the evening. The crowd laughed and applauded again. Victoria approached the piano, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. She studied James with those piercing eyes. Mr. Chen, was it? From maintenance? James nodded, suddenly aware again of his work uniform, his calloused hands, the tool belt still hanging from his waist. I'm impressed, she said simply. No flourish, no dramatic declaration, just a straightforward acknowledgement that carried more weight because of it. Would you be willing to play for our guests this evening? I believe the program calls for about an hour of music during dinner. James glanced at Hector, who stood at the edge of the crowd, looking completely stunned. I'm still on shift, James said quietly. Victoria turned to Hector. I assume the hotel can spare Mr. Chen for an hour. Consider it an upgrade to your entertainment package. Hector nodded quickly. Of course, Ms. Blackwood, whatever you need. James felt a flicker of irritation. He'd been asking for extra hours for months, and Hector had always claimed the budget was tight. But one word from Victoria Blackwood, and suddenly his time was disposable. I'll need to clean up first, James said, gesturing to his uniform. Nonsense. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. The uniform stays. It adds authenticity, don't you think, everyone? The crowd murmured their agreement, and James felt his face grow warm. He was being turned into a spectacle, the maintenance man who could play like a concert pianist. It was exactly what he'd tried to avoid by keeping his past private. But then he looked at the piano again. A real Steinway Model D. The kind he'd only ever dreamed of playing. And someone was asking him, no, paying him to play it for an hour. All right, he agreed. What would you like to hear? Surprise us, Victoria said with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. But perhaps start with more Rachmaninoff? I have a feeling there's more where that came from. As James began to play again, the event staff scrambled to rearrange the evening's schedule. Dinner would now be accompanied by live piano music, not from the hired professional who'd canceled, but from the man who usually fixed leaky faucets and changed light bulbs. He played selections from his old repertoire, more Rachmaninoff, some Chopin, a bit of Debussy. Each piece came back to him like an old friend, sometimes with small gaps or hesitations, but always with the feeling that had once made his teacher praise him as a natural talent. Partway through his performance, Rosa from housekeeping slipped him a glass of water during a brief pause. I knew it, she whispered. I've seen you tapping rhythms on the maintenance cart. Your fingers were always moving like a pianist's. James smiled gratefully and took a sip before beginning a Chopin nocturne. As he played, he noticed that Victoria had taken a seat at the table closest to the piano. She wasn't watching him constantly. She spoke with guests, laughed at jokes, raised her champagne glass in toasts, but her attention kept returning to him, studying him with that same curious expression. The hour passed quickly. Too quickly, James thought as he finished his final piece, an etude by Liszt that had always been his showpiece in competitions. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, many of the guests calling for more. Victoria approached the piano again, "I think we can all agree that Mr. Chen has more than earned his reward," she announced. $10,000 as promised. She turned to James, and of course dinner. "At your convenience." A waiter appeared with a glass of champagne for James. He accepted it awkwardly, not used to being on this side of the service equation. "Speech," someone called from the crowd. James shook his head. "I'm better with my hands than with words," he said quietly, which earned him more applause and laughter. Victoria raised her own glass. "To hidden talents," she said, "and to the Grand Valencia Hotel for having the wisdom to hire Mr. Chen, even if they didn't know quite what they were getting." As the dinner service began in earnest, James was finally allowed to step away from the piano. His hands were trembling slightly, not from nervousness anymore, but from the physical exertion of playing for an hour after so many years without practice. Hector cornered him near the service entrance. "Chen, what the hell was that? You never mentioned you could play like that." James shrugged. "You never asked." "Well, Ms. Blackwood wants you to come to her office tomorrow to collect your reward." Hector stumbled over the last word, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "And she's requested that you be given the day off with pay." "That's not necessary," James began. But Hector cut him off. "It's done. Orders from up top. Victoria Blackwood is our biggest client. What she wants, she gets." He paused, then added grudgingly, "That was really something, Chen. I had no idea." That seemed to be the theme of the evening. No one had had any idea. James had become quite good at making himself invisible, at being the person who fixed things and then disappeared. It was safer that way. Easier. Now, as he made his way through the back corridors of the hotel toward the employee locker room, various staff members stopped to stare or offer congratulations. Word had spread quickly. By morning, everyone in the hotel would know about the maintenance man who'd played Rachmaninoff for Victoria Blackwood. As he changed out of his uniform, his phone buzzed with a text from his sister Lily. "James, someone just posted a video of you playing piano at the Grand Valencia on TikTok. It's going viral. Since when do you play piano again?" He stared at the phone in disbelief. Of course people had recorded it. Everyone had phones. Everyone shared everything these days. His moment of privacy was well and truly over. 3 more messages came in rapid succession. "Mom's crying. Dad wants to know if it's really you. Call home now." James sank onto the bench in front of his locker, phone clutched in his hand. He hadn't told his family he'd started working at the Grand Valencia 6 months ago. They thought he was still at the apartment complex in the east side of town. It had been easier that way. No explanations about why he'd taken a job at the very hotel where they'd once dreamed he might perform as a guest artist someday. With shaking fingers, he called home. "James?" His mother's voice thick with emotion. "Is it really you in that video? Playing the piano again?" "Yes, Mom," he said softly. "It's me. But how? When?" She was crying now, he could hear it. "We thought, after your father got sick, after we had to sell the piano, you said you'd never play again." "I know," he whispered. "I thought so too." There was a pause, then his father's voice came on the line, weaker than it once was, but still strong enough to carry his pride. "Son, you played just like I remember. Maybe even better." James felt his throat tighten. "Dad, there's more. The woman who runs the event, she's offered me $10,000 and a date." "A date?" His mother cut in, suddenly sounding suspicious. "With whom? Why?" James laughed, the tension of the evening finally breaking. "It's a long story, Mom. I'll come by tomorrow and tell you everything. But that money, it's enough for Lily's laptop. And maybe to help with your mortgage payment." "No," his father said firmly. "That money is yours, James. Maybe it's time you got your own piano again." As James hung up, he noticed a text from an unknown number had arrived during his call. "Mr. Chen, this is Victoria Blackwood's personal assistant. Ms. Blackwood has asked me to arrange your dinner for tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. She suggests Antoine's, but says the choice is ultimately yours, as promised. Please advise your preference and whether you require transportation. Also, she asks if you still have her glass of water. She believes she left it on the piano." James read the message twice, then laughed out loud in the empty locker room. Even when arranging to fulfill a public promise, Victoria Blackwood couldn't help but be demanding. He typed back, "Antoine's is fine. No transportation needed, And no, I don't have her water glass. Maintenance doesn't handle glassware. That's housekeeping's department. He hesitated before hitting send, wondering if the response was too bold. Then he remembered the way she'd looked at him during his performance. Not with pity or amusement, but with genuine surprise and respect. He hit send, then added a second message. I prefer to be called James. James woke up the next morning to the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications flooded his screen. Text messages, missed calls, social media tags, and emails from people he hadn't spoken to in years. He squinted at the brightness, trying to make sense of it all. Piano guy from last night, is this you? Read a message from his old high school friend with a link to a video. With a groan, James sat up in bed and clicked the link. The video had over 2 million views already. The caption read, Maintenance worker shocks millionaire with hidden piano talent. The footage was shaky but clear enough, filmed from someone's phone at the charity gala. It showed him in his Navy uniform, bent over the piano, playing Rachmaninoff, while Victoria Blackwood watched with undisguised surprise. The comments section was a mixture of amazement, conspiracy theories, and people trying to identify him. This is insane, he muttered. Scrolling through more messages, 3 different morning TV shows had somehow gotten his contact information and were asking for interviews. A local newspaper wanted his rags to riches story. Someone claiming to be a talent scout from a record label had left a voicemail. His phone rang again. This time it was Lily. James! His sister's excited voice burst through the speaker before he could even say hello. You're famous. Mom and Dad are showing the video to everyone at church. Dad's acting all cool like, of course my son can play like that. But Mom can't stop crying happy tears. It's too much, Lily, James said, running a hand through his hair. I just played some piano. People are acting like I saved the world or something. You don't get it, Lily said. It's not just that you played well. It's the whole story. The maintenance worker who shocked everyone, the millionaire's challenge, all of it. People love that stuff. It's like a movie. James sighed. Well, the movie continues tonight. I'm having dinner with Victoria Blackwood. There was a pause on the other end. Wait, that part was real? I thought it was just for show. She's actually taking you on a date? Apparently. Her assistant texted me last night to set it up. What are you going to wear? Please tell me not your uniform. James looked around his small apartment. His closet didn't exactly contain clothes suitable for Antoine's, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. I hadn't thought about that. You need to look good, James. This is important. This could change everything for you. It's just dinner, Lily. She's fulfilling her end of a public promise. It doesn't mean anything. Nothing means anything until it does, Lily said with the wisdom of a 20-year-old college student. I'm coming over. We're going shopping. Before he could protest, she had hung up. James flopped back onto his bed, staring at the ceiling. How had his life changed so completely in less than 24 hours? His phone pinged with a new email. This one was from Victoria Blackwood herself, not her assistant. The subject line simply read, Your reward. He opened it, half expecting a cancellation of their dinner plans. Instead, he found a brief message. Mr. Chen, James. The promised sum has been transferred to your account. Banking details were provided by your employer. Please verify receipt regarding tonight. Antoine's has a dress code. My assistant can arrange appropriate attire if needed. Let me know your measurements. Looking forward to hearing more of your story. Victoria James checked his bank account. Sure enough, there it was, $10,000, just like that. More money than he'd ever had at once. His first thought was his sister's laptop for college. His second was his parents' mortgage payment. His third, finally, was the small digital piano he'd been eyeing online for years but could never justify buying. Another ping from his phone. This time a text from Hector. Chen, the hotel manager, wants to meet with you at 2 p.m. Also, there are reporters in the lobby asking about you. What did you do? James texted back. I'll be there at 2 and I just played piano, that's all. He added a reply to Victoria's email. Ms. Blackwood, money received, thank you. No need for clothing assistance. See you at 8 at James. By the time Lily arrived, James had showered and was attempting to tame his usually unruly hair. Good. You're already getting ready, she said, bursting into his apartment with the energy only a college student could have before noon. We have so much to do. Lily, I don't need... Yes, you do, she interrupted, looking around his apartment critically. You need clothes. You need a haircut. You need to practice talking to rich people. I talk to rich people every day at the hotel, James protested. Fixing their toilets isn't the same as having dinner with them, Lily pointed out. Trust me on this. 5 hours later, James hardly recognized himself in the mirror of the men's clothing store. Lily had dragged him to 3 different stores before finding what she called the perfect balance of sophisticated but not trying too hard. He wore a charcoal, gray suit that fit better than anything he'd ever owned, a light blue shirt and a subtle patterned tie that Lily assured him brought out his eyes. You clean up good, big brother, she said, circling him like a fashion consultant. Now remember, don't hunch your shoulders. Stand tall. You're not fixing pipes tonight. You're having dinner with one of the most powerful women in tech. James nodded, feeling like an imposter in his new clothes. I still need to stop by the hotel for that meeting with the manager. Fine, but don't get anything on the suit, Lily called after him as he carefully got into his old Honda, trying not to wrinkle his new outfit. The Grand Valencia Hotel looked different to him now as he walked through the main entrance instead of the service door. Guests turned to look at him, some with recognition in their eyes. A bellhop he knew nodded respectfully instead of the usual casual wave. The hotel manager, Mr. Reynolds, was waiting in his office. He stood as James entered, offering his hand. Mr. Chen, thank you for coming in on your day off. James shook his hand, feeling strangely formal with his boss's boss. No problem, sir. Is everything okay? More than okay, Reynolds said, gesturing for James to sit. I've been fielding calls all morning about you. The video of your performance has put the Grand Valencia in the spotlight. Our social media mentions are up 500% since last night. James shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry for any trouble. Trouble? No, Reynolds laughed. This is the best publicity we've had in years. A hidden virtuoso on our maintenance staff? People love this kind of story. James wasn't sure how to respond. He'd never been in the manager's office before, let alone been called a virtuoso by him. Reynolds continued, I'd like to offer you a new position. Our resident pianist recently gave notice and the timing couldn't be better. The job is yours if you want it, James blinked in surprise. You want me to play piano for the hotel? Full-time, 4 nights a week in the lobby lounge, 8 to midnight. The pay is considerably better than maintenance plus tips. Reynolds named a figure that made James's eyebrows rise. Of course, if you prefer to stay in maintenance, we understand. But the offer is on the table. James thought about the countless hours he'd spent fixing leaky faucets, unclogging drains, and changing light bulbs. Then he thought about playing piano for 4 hours a night, being paid to do what he'd once loved more than anything. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. Take the weekend. But I should mention, we've already had calls asking if the piano guy from the video performs regularly here. You could be quite the draw. As James left the hotel, his mind was spinning with possibilities that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. A new job, money in the bank, a date with Victoria Blackwood. He arrived at Antoine's 15 minutes early, nervously adjusting his tie in the reflection of the restaurant's window. The maitre d' eyed him with mild suspicion until he mentioned Victoria's name. Ah, Miss Blackwood's guest. This way, please. He was led to a private dining area separated from the main restaurant by frosted glass panels. Victoria was already there, typing rapidly on her phone. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than 3 months of James's rent. Her dark hair was down tonight, softening her features. She looked up as he approached. You found suitable attire after all, she observed, putting her phone away. My sister has strong opinions about fashion, James said, taking the seat across from her. A ghost of a smile appeared on Victoria's face. Siblings often do. Wine? James nodded, and she signaled the hovering waiter to pour. I should thank you properly for the money, James said after taking a sip of what was undoubtedly the most expensive wine he'd ever tasted. It's very generous. I always keep my promises, Victoria said simply, though I must admit I didn't expect to be quite so impressed. Where did you learn to play like that? And so James found himself telling Victoria Blackwood the story he'd kept mostly to himself for years, about the second-hand upright piano his parents had bought when he was 6, about the teacher who'd given him discounted lessons after noticing his unusual talent, about the competitions he'd won, the scholarship he'd been offered to a prestigious music school, and then his father's illness. The medical bills, the impossible choices. We sold the piano when I was 18, he concluded. Dad needed specialized treatments. It was the right decision. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. And you haven't played since? Not until last night, James admitted. I couldn't afford a piano and it hurt too much to play on someone else's, so I just stopped. Yet you remembered Rachmaninoff perfectly. Not perfectly, James corrected. I made mistakes, but the muscle memory was still there somehow. Victoria took a sip of her wine, studying him over the rim of her glass. Do you know why I made that challenge last night? James shook his head. Boredom, mostly, she said with unexpected candor. These charity events all blend together after a while. The same people, the same conversations, the same predictable outcomes. She set her glass down. I never expected to find someone like you. Someone like me? Someone with extraordinary talent who's been hiding in plain sight. Do you have any idea how rare that is these days? Everyone with an ounce of ability plasters it all over social media, desperate for attention. She leaned forward slightly. But not you. You buried your gift and became invisible. James felt his face grow warm under her intense gaze. It wasn't a choice exactly. Everything is a choice, Victoria said firmly. And now you have more choices to make. I heard the Grand Valencia offered you a position as their resident pianist. James stared at her in surprise. How did you know that? The corner of her mouth quirked up. I know the owner. So will you take it? As their food arrived, James realized this dinner was turning out nothing like he'd expected. He'd thought Victoria Blackwood would treat this as an obligation, a public promise fulfilled and then forgotten. Instead, she was asking about his life, his choices, his future, with what seemed like genuine interest. I haven't decided yet, he answered honestly. It's all happening so fast. Victoria nodded. Sleep on it. But don't wait too long. Moments like these, when life suddenly opens new doors, they don't come often. As they finished their meal, James found himself wondering if she was talking about the job offer, or something else entirely. Their dinner at Antoine's stretched past 2 hours, something James hadn't expected. Victoria Blackwood, it turned out, was a good listener. She asked thoughtful questions about his family, his years of piano training, and even his work and maintenance. She seemed genuinely interested in his answers, never glancing at her phone or showing signs of boredom. What about you? James finally asked as they shared a dessert. A chocolate souffle that cost more than he usually spent on groceries for a week. How did you get into tech? A small smile played at Victoria's lips. The usual story. College dropout with big ideas, slept on friends' couches, lived on ramen, coded until my eyes bled. Then one day the app took off and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of what I'd built. That doesn't sound like the usual story, James pointed out. Most college dropouts don't become millionaires before 30. True enough. She took a small bite of the souffle, though I was 28, not 30. And the overnight success took 6 years of failure first, James nodded. He understood something about delayed dreams. As they left the restaurant, Victoria's driver was waiting with a sleek black car. Can I drop you somewhere? She offered. James hesitated, suddenly aware of how their worlds would separate again once dinner was over. I drove here, he said, gesturing vaguely toward where his Honda was parked several blocks away. Victoria nodded. Well, James Chen, thank you for an unexpectedly pleasant evening. She extended her hand. He shook it, feeling the strange formality of the gesture after their hours of conversation. Thank you for dinner, and for the opportunity yesterday. She studied him for a moment. You should take the job at the Grand Valencia. It's a start. A start for what? For whatever comes next. She pulled a business card from her small purse and handed it to him. My personal number. Not my assistant's. If you decide to play again, really play, not just hotel lounge music, let me know. Before he could ask what she meant, she had slipped into the car and was gone, leaving James standing on the sidewalk holding her card. The drive home was surreal. His old Honda felt even more out of place than usual after the luxury of Antoine's. His mind kept replaying moments from the evening, the way Victoria had leaned forward when he talked about his competitions, the rare occasions when she'd laughed at something he said, how she'd listened without interrupting as he described his father's illness. He hadn't expected to enjoy her company. He'd expected a publicity stunt, a rich person's idea of charity. dining with the help. But it hadn't felt that way at all. His phone rang through the car speakers. Lily. Well? His sister's excited voice filled the car. How was it? What was she like? Did she offer you a recording contract? Are you in love? James laughed. Slow down, Lily. It was just dinner. Just dinner with one of the richest women in the country. Come on, details. She was. Not what I expected, James said carefully. Smart, intense, actually interested in what I had to say. We talked about music, about why I stopped playing. She knows about the hotel's job offer. Are you going to take it? You have to take it, James, he sighed. I don't know yet. It's a big change, and that's the point. You've been stuck in the same place for years. Ever since Dad got sick, it's like you put your life on pause. Her words hit closer to home than she knew. Had he been stuck? After his father's diagnosis, James had shelved his own dreams so completely that he'd almost forgotten they existed. College plans abandoned. Music scholarship declined. Piano sold. He'd taken the first steady job he could find to help with the medical bills, then another, then another. Maybe you're right, he admitted. But playing in a hotel lounge isn't exactly a concert career. It's a step, one step. That's all you need to take right now. When he got home, James sat in his darkened apartment for a long time, Victoria's business card in his hand. His phone was still blowing up with notifications. More messages, more interview requests, more people from his past suddenly remembering his existence. On impulse, he pulled up a local music store's website. The digital piano he'd been eyeing for years was still there. With the money Victoria had given him, he could afford it easily now. His finger hovered over the Buy Now button. Instead, he clicked on another category: acoustic pianos. Real pianos with strings and hammers and soundboards, the kind that vibrated through your fingertips and into your soul when you played. There was one, a pre-owned upright, nothing fancy, but from a respectable maker. The description mentioned it had been recently reconditioned with new felts and strings. The price was exactly $9,800, almost his entire windfall. Before he could second-guess himself, James clicked purchase and entered his payment information. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. The piano would be delivered in 3 days. He slept better that night than he had in years. The next morning, James called the hotel manager. Mr. Reynolds? It's James Chen. I'd like to accept the pianist position. Excellent. Reynolds sounded genuinely pleased. When can you start? Next week? James suggested. I need a few days to prepare. He didn't mention the piano currently being prepared for delivery to his apartment. Perfect. We'll announce it on our social media today. The PR team is thrilled, by the way. The video of your performance has over 10 million views now. After hanging up, James sat down at his kitchen table and made a list of songs he remembered well enough to play in public. It was a surprisingly long list. Then he made a second list, pieces he'd need to practice to relearn. This list was even longer. His fingers twitched, muscle memory stirring. 3 days until the piano arrived. They would be the longest 3 days of his life. His phone rang. His father, James, your mother and I just saw the news about your new job at the hotel. Is it true? It's true, Dad. I'm going to be playing piano again, professionally. There was a pause, then his father's voice thick with emotion. Your mother's crying again. Happy tears. James felt his own eyes grow damp. I bought a piano, Dad, with the money from Victoria Blackwood. It's being delivered this weekend. A digital one? Like you were looking at before? No, a real one. Nothing fancy, but real. Another pause. I wish we'd never had to sell yours. I'm sorry, son. Don't be sorry. We did what we had to do. James took a deep breath. How about you and Mom come over Sunday, after the piano's delivered? I'll play for you. He could hear his father's voice break as he called to his mother. Min Hui, James wants us to come hear him play his new piano on Sunday. In the background, his mother's joyful exclamation made James smile. The next 3 days passed in a blur. James gave notice at his maintenance job. He cleared space in his apartment for the piano. He bought sheet music online. He answered congratulatory messages from friends and politely declined most of the interview requests, though he did agree to one with a local news station. And he thought about Victoria Blackwood. He'd drafted and deleted a dozen text messages to the number on her card. What would he even say? Thanks again for dinner? I bought a piano with your money? Everything sounded either too casual or too formal. Finally, on the day before his piano was to be delivered, he typed a simple message. I took your advice. Starting at the Grand Valencia next week. Also bought a piano. Thank you for both the opportunity and the insight. James. He pressed send before he could overthink it, then put his phone away and went for a run to burn off his nervous energy. When he returned an hour later, there was a reply. Good choices. I'll have to come hear you play sometime. When's your first night? James's heart beat a little faster as he replied. Friday, 8 p.m. Lounge dress code is business casual. In case you're wondering, 3 dots appeared. Then I don't do casual business or otherwise. But I'll make an exception. Save me a good song. Sunday arrived and with it James's piano. The delivery men struggled to get it up the stairs to his 3rd-floor apartment. But eventually it sat in the corner of his living room, gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. The moment they left, James sat down on the bench. He placed his hands on the keys, feeling their resistance, so different from the electronic keyboard at the hotel. He pressed middle C, then let the sound ring out and fade naturally. Real. It was real. He began to play tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. His fingers were remembering, finding their way home. By the time his parents knocked on his door 2 hours later, he was lost in Chopin. His mother burst into tears the moment she saw him at the piano. His father stood in the doorway, leaning more heavily on his cane than he once had, but with the same proud smile James remembered from his childhood competitions. Play for us, son, his father said simply, and James did. He played the pieces they remembered, his competition pieces, his recital favorites. His fingers stumbled occasionally. His timing was sometimes off, but it didn't matter. This wasn't a performance for Victoria Blackwood or hotel guests or viral video viewers. This was for the people who had sacrificed everything for his gift, only to watch him lock it away. As the afternoon sunlight faded into evening, James played on. And when he finally walked his parents to their car, his mother hugged him tightly and whispered, "You've come back to yourself." That night, as he sat alone at his new piano, James realized she was right. He'd been hiding not just his talent but himself, fixing things for other people while his own life remained broken. He pulled out Victoria's business card again and typed another message. The piano arrived. It feels like coming home. Thank you again, James. He didn't expect a reply, not at this hour. But one came almost immediately. Some talents can't stay buried forever. They find their way back to the surface. Get some rest, pianist. You have a new life starting Friday. James smiled in his dimly lit apartment, his fingers still resting lightly on the piano keys. A new life indeed. Friday evening arrived faster than James expected. He stood in the employee bathroom of the Grand Valencia, adjusting the new outfit the hotel had provided for his first night as their resident pianist. Gone was the Navy maintenance uniform, replaced by tailored black pants and a crisp white shirt with the hotel's gold emblem embroidered subtly on the breast pocket. Looking sharp, piano man, said Tomas, one of the bartenders as he washed his hands. Nervous? James nodded. A little. It's been a long time since I played for an audience. Well, intentionally anyway, Thomas laughed. Don't worry. Friday night crowd is easy. Business travelers wanting to unwind. Couples on dates who aren't listening anyway. Just play something pretty in the background. He dried his hands and clapped James on the shoulder. Though I hear the boss lady might show up tonight. The boss lady? Victoria Blackwood. Word is she's reserved the corner table. Thomas winked. Special request. That view gives a perfect angle of the piano. James's heart skipped. She was actually coming. Despite their text messages, part of him hadn't really believed she would follow through. The lounge was already half full when James took his place at the piano. Not the grand Steinway from the ballroom, but a smaller baby grand, still far nicer than anything he'd played before his new upright at home. He adjusted the bench, feeling the weight of eyes on him. A few guests were clearly recognizing him from the viral video, nudging their companions and pointing discreetly. He took a deep breath and began to play. Simple pieces at first, jazz standards, gentle classical favorites, the kind of pleasant background music Thomas had described. His fingers moved more confidently now after 5 days of nearly non-stop practice at home. The muscle memory was returning, bringing with it the joy he'd once known. An hour into his performance, he saw her. Victoria entered the lounge wearing a deep blue dress that made heads turn. The maitre d' guided her to the corner table Tomas had mentioned. She sat gracefully, declining a menu with a small shake of her head, ordering what appeared to be a single drink. James kept playing, but he was acutely aware of her presence now. Should he acknowledge her? Wave, nod, or just keep playing as if she were any other guest? He decided on a middle path. As he finished the current piece, he seamlessly transitioned into Rachmaninoff, the same concerto he'd played that first night. A quiet murmur went through the lounge as some guests recognized the music from the viral video. James risked a glance at Victoria. She was watching him, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. When their eyes met, she raised her glass slightly in acknowledgement. For the next half hour, he played more challenging pieces than the typical lounge fare. Chopin, more Rachmaninoff, even a bit of Liszt. The lounge grew more crowded, with people standing at the bar to listen. James was vaguely aware of hotel staff bringing in extra chairs, of people recording on their phones, but his focus remained on the music. And occasionally, on the woman in the corner. During his break, he hesitated, then made his way to Victoria's table. "You came," he said, suddenly feeling awkward in his new uniform. "I said I would." She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Sit, you've earned a break." James sat down, aware of the curious glances from nearby tables. "How am I doing?" "Better than hotel lounge music deserves," Victoria said frankly. "But it's a start." She took a sip of her drink. "How does it feel? Playing again?" "Like," James searched for the right words, "like I found something I didn't realize I'd lost." Victoria nodded as if she understood perfectly. "I've been thinking about our conversation at dinner, about choices and opportunities, and," James prompted when she paused, "and I've been looking into something. A program at Westridge Conservatory for exceptional adult musicians who never completed their formal training." James felt a jolt of surprise. "Westridge? That's one of the best music schools in the country." "It is," Victoria agreed. "They have a special fellowship for what they call delayed virtuosos, people who showed remarkable talent in youth but were prevented from pursuing it professionally due to circumstances beyond their control." She fixed him with her intense gaze. "People like you. I don't understand." "How do you know about this?" Victoria smiled slightly. "I made some calls. The dean of music there is on the board of one of my charitable foundations. The winter term starts in January." James's mind raced, but the application deadline must have passed months ago. "It did," Victoria acknowledged. "But exceptions can be made in exceptional circumstances." She pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. "All the information is in here. The dean would like to schedule an audition for you next month." James stared at the envelope without touching it. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria's expression grew serious. "Do you know how many talented people never get the chance to become what they could be? How many gifts go undeveloped because of money or circumstance or just plain bad luck?" She leaned forward. "I built my company on finding untapped potential. Why should I limit that to technology? So I'm, what, a project? A charity case?" James couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Victoria's eyes flashed. "Don't insult both of us, James. I don't do charity cases. I make investments. I've heard you play. I've heard what you can do with almost no practice after 8 years away from the piano. I can only imagine what you could do with proper training and resources. And what do you get out of this? Investment?" The question hung in the air between them. Victoria took another sip of her drink before answering. The satisfaction of righting a wrong, of seeing talent properly nurtured, and perhaps, she added with a hint of vulnerability he hadn't seen before, the pleasure of getting to know the real James Chen, not the maintenance man or the hotel pianist, but the artist he was meant to be. James felt something shift inside him. For so long he'd defined himself by what he'd lost, by the dreams he'd abandoned. Now this woman, this brilliant, demanding, unexpected woman, was offering him a chance to redefine himself. "I should get back to the piano," he said finally. "My break's almost over." Victoria nodded, but he could see disappointment flicker across her face. He stood but didn't walk away immediately. "Victoria," he said, her first name feeling strange on his lips after calling her Ms. Blackwood for so long. "Thank you. I'll read everything tonight." Her smile returned. Good. Play something special before you finish. Something for me. As James returned to the piano, he felt as though he were standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified, exhilarated, and somehow more alive than he'd been in years. He sat down, flexed his fingers, and began to play. This time he chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, delicate, dreamy, filled with longing and hope. He closed his eyes, letting the music speak all the things he couldn't find words for: his gratitude, his fear, his tentative step toward a future he'd thought forever closed to him. When he opened his eyes again, Victoria was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Something softer than her usual intensity, something that made his fingers falter briefly on the keys before finding their way again. As his shift ended and the last notes faded, the lounge erupted in applause. James stood and gave a slight bow, still uncomfortable with the attention but learning to accept it. As the crowd began to disperse, he saw Victoria still sitting at her table. She hadn't applauded with the others. Instead, she simply watched him, waiting. He packed up his sheet music and walked over to her table one last time. "Did you like it?" he asked. "I did," she said simply. "What did you decide?" James took a deep breath. "I'd like to audition. I can't promise I'll get in, or that I'll be what they're looking for, but you will be," Victoria interrupted with absolute certainty. She stood gathering her purse. "I'll have my driver take you home. We can discuss the details." "I have my car," James began to protest. "Tomorrow then," Victoria said. "Breakfast. I'll text you the place." It wasn't a question, and James found himself nodding. As they walked toward the lounge exit together, he was acutely aware of the stairs following them, the hotel pianist and the tech millionaire, moving side by side as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Outside, Victoria's driver held the car door open for her. Before stepping in, she turned to James. "I'm glad you played the piano that night," she said quietly. "So am I," he replied. She hesitated, then reached out and briefly touched his hand. "Good night, James." "Good night, Victoria." As her car pulled away, James stood in the cool night air, the envelope from Westridge Conservatory in his pocket. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "How was your first night?" "Did she come?" He smiled and typed back, "It was amazing." She came, and Lily, "I think my life is about to change. Again." 6 months later, James sat on a different bench before a different piano, in a practice room at Westridge Conservatory. Sheet music for his upcoming recital was spread before him, his first formal performance as a student in the Delayed Virtuosos Fellowship program. The door opened behind him. Victoria walked in, elegant as always, carrying 2 coffee cups. "How's it coming?" she asked, setting one cup beside him on the bench. "Better," James said, taking a grateful sip. "Though Professor Winters says my technique is still too emotional." Victoria laughed. "That's why I like it." She sat beside him on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved in ways neither had expected. What had begun as a bizarre challenge in a hotel ballroom had become something deeper, a partnership of equals, each bringing out the best in the other. "Play it for me," she requested. The third movement. "It's still rough," he warned. "I don't mind rough," she said with a smile. "I like seeing the work in progress." As James began to play, Victoria closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. His technique might not be perfect yet, but his passion was undeniable. That was what had drawn her to him that first night, not just his hidden talent, but the raw emotion behind it. The authenticity. In 3 weeks, he would perform publicly as a conservatory student. His parents would be in the front row, his sister recording every moment. Victoria would be there too, not as his patron or his girlfriend, but as the person who had seen his potential, when even he had forgotten it existed. Life took strange turns, James thought as his fingers danced across the keys. Sometimes you had to lose everything to find your way back to yourself. Sometimes a ridiculous challenge from a bored millionaire could change everything. And sometimes the most unexpected person could become the one who understood you best. Victoria's hand came to rest lightly on his shoulder as he played. He leaned into her touch, never missing a note. Some talents couldn't stay buried forever. Some connections were simply meant to be.